Welcome to Truth Behind History. The stories are real, the impact is lasting. Today we're diving into one of the most secretive and controversial programs ever run by the United States government, COINTELPRO. That's short for Counterintelligence Program. It was launched by the FBI in 1956, but don't let the name fool you. This wasn't about spies overseas. This was about American citizens, activists, protesters, leaders of change. Why would the US government target its own people? Well, to understand that, we need to go back to the Cold War era, right after World War II. The world was split between two superpowers, the capitalist United States and the communist Soviet Union. Each side believed they were fighting not just for control of land or resources, but for the soul of the modern world. And that made everything feel like a potential threat. Back home, the Red Scare took root. Americans were told that communists could be lurking anywhere, next door, in Hollywood, even inside the government. Propaganda posters warned of traitors in disguise. J. Edgar Hoover, the longtime FBI director, saw communism not just as a foreign threat but as a domestic infection. And under his leadership, the agency would go far beyond watching foreign agents. They'd start watching Americans. At the same time, the civil rights movement was gaining momentum. Black Americans were marching, organizing, and demanding equal rights. This was powerful. It was moral. But to many in power, it looked like disorder, a challenge to the status quo. And in the paranoia of the Cold War, that challenge started to look like subversion. So what happens when a government with global surveillance power turns inward, toward its own people? That's where COINTELPRO begins. COINTELPRO. It sounds clinical, doesn't it? Like a high-security protocol with limited scope and noble goals. Officially, it stood for Counterintelligence Program. The FBI claimed it was designed to protect national security, meant to root out threats from within. But here's the twist. The more you look into what they actually did, the less it resembles counterintelligence, and the more it looks like sabotage. According to internal FBI documents, now declassified, the mission was clear: to disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize groups or individuals deemed subversive. That's the FBI's own language. But who got to define what was subversive? In practice, it included civil rights leaders, student organizers, anti-war protesters, and black nationalists. People exercising their First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, were now targets of surveillance and psychological warfare. And the tactics? They read like a spy thriller written by someone with a grudge. Wiretapping phones, forging letters to sow distrust among activists, planting undercover agents inside peaceful organizations, even spreading rumors of infidelity or betrayal to break up marriages or ruin reputations. The goal wasn't just to monitor these people, it was to destroy them from the inside out. This wasn't a glitch in the system. It was the system. There were no trials, no oversight, no transparency. The FBI operated in the shadows, often without the knowledge or approval of the courts. And if you think this only happened to people on the fringes, think again. Many of those targeted were mainstream civil rights leaders and clergy who simply wanted a better future for America. It's easy to assume that in a democracy, the government would protect dissent. But COINTELPRO shows us something different, that when fear becomes policy, even peaceful opposition can be treated like an enemy of the state. Let's talk about who COINTELPRO actually went after. Because it wasn't just anonymous radicals or violent extremists. It was some of the most influential and beloved figures in the civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was perhaps the program's most infamous target. A man who preached nonviolence, who dreamed of a country where people would be judged not by the color of their skin but by the content of their character. And yet, the FBI saw him as dangerous. Not because he was violent, but because he was effective. They wiretapped his phones, bugged his hotel rooms, and followed him across the country. They sent him an anonymous letter trying to pressure him into suicide, suggesting that if he didn't step down from public life, his secrets would be revealed. Can you imagine that? The government trying to psychologically break someone simply for demanding dignity. But King wasn't the only one. Malcolm X, with his fiery speeches and bold vision of black self-determination, became another prime target. The FBI tried to exploit rifts within the Nation of Islam to isolate him, knowing full well it might lead to violence. And when he broke away and began working toward international human rights advocacy, their surveillance intensified. Stokely Carmichael, later known as Kwame Ture, also came under heavy watch. He popularized the term Black Power and challenged America to confront its deep systemic racism. That alone was enough to trigger full-blown COINTELPRO attention. But the goal wasn't just to keep tabs on these leaders. It was to turn them against each other. Divide and conquer. that was the strategy. Spread false rumors, forge letters, whisper in the ears of insiders, anything to fracture coalitions, ignite rivalries, and break the growing sense of unity among black leaders. Because unity? That was the real threat. The FBI's internal memos specifically warned against the rise of what they called a Black Messiah, someone who could electrify the masses and challenge the establishment. And so the state didn't just monitor civil rights leaders. It tried to dismantle their lives, their movements, and their legacies, all in the name of national security. Now let's talk about the ripple effects, the damage COINTELPRO caused at the community level. Because this wasn't just a war against individuals, it was a war against uplift. Grassroots organizations in black communities were doing more than just marching. They were feeding children, educating neighbors, organizing tenants, creating programs that filled the gaps left by a system that had ignored them for generations. Take the free breakfast program, launched by the Black Panther Party. It was simple: feed kids before school so they could learn better. But to the FBI, that was dangerous. J. Edgar Hoover described the program, not a militia, not a riot, but a breakfast program, as one of the biggest threats to the internal security of the United States. Why? Because it worked. Because it made the Panthers look like protectors instead of villains. Because it showed people that local action could lead to real change. So what did the government do? They disrupted these efforts. They sent informants to spread rumors, created fake flyers to stir distrust, and framed programs like these as fronts for violence or extremism. They painted anything community-driven as criminal by association, erasing the nuance and poisoning public perception. And the cost wasn't just political. It was psychological, economic, structural. Many community leaders were arrested under false pretenses or driven into hiding. Donations dried up. Volunteers were scared off. Schools and food programs lost the people who made them run. And over time, that created a vacuum, a breakdown in trust between communities and law enforcement, between citizens and the state. It's easy to underestimate what that does to a neighborhood. When your mentors vanish, when your safe spaces collapse, when even breakfast is treated like subversion, it sends a message. One that echoes through generations: you are not allowed to build. You are not allowed to rise. And that message didn't end in the 1970s. Its residue is still with us. Let's zoom out for a moment, because behind all the tactics, all the wiretaps and forged letters, there's a bigger question lurking in the background. What kind of power structure allows this to happen? At its core, COINTELPRO was a clash between two models of power. On one side, you had decentralized, grassroots movements, local leaders, community-built programs, people organizing block by block to solve problems no one else would touch: poverty, racism, hunger, injustice. These weren't perfect systems, but they were built from the ground up. Voluntary, local, responsive to the people they served. On the other side, centralized federal authority, a bureaucracy with nearly unlimited reach, operating in secret, answerable only to itself. It wasn't just responding to threats, it was defining them. And once a group got that label, anything became justifiable. Surveillance, sabotage, psychological warfare. And here's the critical part: the incentives were distorted. In a decentralized system, success means community empowerment. A kid gets fed, a family gets housing, a neighborhood becomes safer. But in a centralized system like COINTELPRO, success meant neutralizing perceived threats, even if those threats were peaceful, lawful, and beneficial. The more effective a group became at helping people, the more dangerous it looked to those in power. So instead of encouraging reform, the system punished it. Instead of rewarding innovation, it suppressed it. That's not a bug. That's how centralized power often works when it's unchecked. It's like giving someone a fire hose and telling them to manage a candle. Sooner or later, they're going to put out more than just the flame. What we see in COINTELPRO is not just a story of abuse. It's a story of misaligned incentives, of how a powerful institution, built without transparency or accountability, ends up targeting the very people trying to fix what's broken. And once that trust is broken, it's hard to rebuild. So, what happened when the truth came out? In the 1970s, a group of activists broke into an FBI office in Pennsylvania. What they found shocked the country: thousands of pages detailing illegal surveillance and operations against American citizens. That leak led to a storm of outrage, and eventually to Congress launching a full investigation. That's when the Church Committee was formed. Named after Senator Frank Church, the committee exposed not just COINTELPRO, but a wide web of surveillance abuses by the FBI, the CIA, and even the NSA. Spying on journalists, monitoring political dissidents, targeting people not because they were violent, but because they challenged the status quo. The result? A wave of reforms. FISA courts were created to provide secret judicial oversight for intelligence surveillance. There were new rules, new agencies, and the appearance of transparency. For a moment, it seemed like the system had corrected itself. But did it? After the 9th of November, the pendulum swung hard in the other direction. Surveillance expanded, this time digitally. Phone records, emails, metadata, all swept up in the name of national security. The tools changed, but the logic stayed eerily familiar. You know the names: Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, whistleblowers who pulled back the curtain again, showing the world that surveillance hadn't disappeared. It had just become more efficient, more invisible, more automated. And now we live in an era where algorithms track protests, facial recognition monitors crowds, and dissent online can trigger scrutiny in real life. The ghosts of COINTELPRO didn't vanish, they went digital. But here's the silver lining: people know now. There's a growing movement for transparency, for privacy rights, for reform that doesn't sacrifice freedom in the name of fear. Activists today are using encrypted messaging, digital literacy, and public records laws to fight back, with the same spirit as the organizers of the past. The question isn't whether the tools exist, it's who controls them, and what they're willing to do when no one's watching. So, what do we take away from all this? COINTELPRO wasn't just a scandal. It was a mirror, a reflection of how a nation that claims to value liberty can, under the weight of fear, turn against its own principles. It forces us to ask hard questions. Who decides what counts as dissent? What happens when the people trying to fix the system are labeled as threats to it? And how much power is too much to give to any institution, no matter how well-intentioned it claims to be? The story of COINTELPRO reminds us that democracy isn't self-sustaining. It requires vigilance. It requires debate. And more than anything, it requires ordinary people willing to speak truth, even when it's dangerous to do so. That's why decentralized action matters. That's why grassroots movements matter. Not because they're perfect, but because they're grounded in human experience, not bureaucratic fear. Because they build up instead of tear down. And because history shows us, time and time again, that when power goes unchecked, it doesn't just fail the people, it targets them. So if you've ever wondered how much freedom is too much to lose in the name of safety, or whether our institutions really learn from their mistakes, this is your answer, and this is your moment. Thanks for watching Truth Behind History. The stories are real, the impact is lasting. If you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps more than you know. And if you want to dive even deeper into hidden truths, erased legacies, and overlooked power struggles, check out my book History They Tried to Erase. The link is in the description. For more videos that challenge what you thought you knew, keep exploring this channel. The past still speaks. You just have to know where to listen.